Hello everyone, this is RaySpace and welcome back to Realism Overhaul Sandbox in Kerbal Space Program 1.12. I have here the Kasei II rocket with the Fuji stage. The Kasei II is a 10.1 meter diameter rocket, so same diameter as Saturn V, but it is completely hydrogen and oxygen, whereas Saturn V only had the second and third stages, hydrogen and oxygen. And we have on top of it the Fuji stage. However, it's not the normal Fuji stage. The Fuji stage is one that I created and was meant to be a nuclear stage, so it is filled almost entirely with hydrogen. However, it has some oxygen for its OMS engines. It has supplementary engines that complete orbit, and those are hydrogen and oxygen. And it has built-in radiators that also serve as a shroud while it is attached to the lower stage. And instead, in this case, instead of having the nuclear engines, I have hydrogen burning or hydrogen accelerating VASIMR engines. So we have these from the near future pack. I made a configuration for them. And normally the near future pack's VASIMR uses argon gas, but VASIMR is always meant to eventually use hydrogen. And so I made a hydrogen configuration for it. And we are going to be using Pekka's warp thrust mod, though for some reason has a duplicate thing going on here. So I'll have to check if I got two. It shouldn't affect the numbers at all. But we have 3 sets of these. Each pair uses 800 kilowatts. So that's 2.4 megawatts altogether. The reactors are here. They're molten salt reactors and generators from the KSP Interstellar pack. They generate more than enough power. And I believe the radiators that we have here, they're static radiators, they don't turn, but overall they'll be able to handle the amount of heat. At least I told KSP Interstellar what the area of them were, and it seems like they do the trick. So we have that going for us. They were originally meant to keep the hydrogen cool in here, but even with them, I have the capacity to hold hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, so actually hold the boil off from the hydrogen and oxygen so that we can cool them later, just in case we have boil off. So we have a start cryocooler option and a start oxygen cooling option. We also have a fuel cell. There's a very capable hydrogen oxygen setup here. And yeah, we'll see how much payload we can get to the moon first of all. And the payload here is 100 tons. So let's go through this a little bit. We have a 2,500 ton rocket. So it's less mass than SLS, but SLS has SRBs, and less mass than Saturn V, about half the mass of a Starship Super Heavy. And somebody had noted that even without the whole setup that we have here with VASIMR and all, it is a very capable rocket in terms of its mass fraction to orbit. And the reason for that is because it's very close to optimal for hydrolux. I've mentioned before that the optimal sort of delta V that you want from your stages is equal to the exhaust velocity. And that is roughly 9.81 times your specific impulse. So if we take a look at the specific impulse of the engines down here, we see that their specific impulse in vacuum is 434. And so rounding to 10, we would want 4,340 meters per second. And we have a little bit less than that in this case. But then the next stage has the vacuum engines. They get 450, so we'd be expecting about 4,500 from them. We get a little bit more from them, and that, but it's close enough that we're basically staging optimally with this hydrogen oxygen launcher. And one thing that we can do is add boosters as well. Right now you can see that we're getting only 9,000 meters per second. The reason that that's okay is because we are going to be using the Fuji stage to complete orbit, and so it is currently locked. And actually we could probably put more mass than I've put on here. I've underfueled the Fuji stage, but we could probably add a little bit more, and then that would bring this number down a little bit. But just for safety's sake, I've just half filled it. what will happen is this is probably more than enough to transfer the payload to the moon and also get the Fuji stage back to low Earth orbit. That's my goal. So we'll go to the moon, capture around the moon, drop the payload off, the 100 tons, and come back. So then it would refuel, and when it refuels, it could get a full load of hydrogen and also dock to a new payload. So that's the goal there. But right now we're only doing half full on that. And yeah, so basically the idea is this is a was designed to be the most efficient possible hydrolox rocket to low Earth orbit. It's optimized for low Earth orbit. The reason why there's no real rocket like this is because practically every hydrogen-oxygen rocket that we've got is not optimized for low Earth orbit at all. It's optimized for geostationary transfer orbit. That is where we put most of our big satellites. So that means that instead of aiming for 9,000 or 9,500 meters per second, you're aiming for 12,000. And in that case, your first stage needs 6,000 or so. Your second stage needs 6,000 or so, which is possible with a small payload. And to sort of supplement it, you get boosters like SRBs or something like that. And that's the setup. So then the first stage actually ends up doing most of the work to get you to orbit. And then the second stage only does a little bit to get to orbit, but then has a lot of delta V to transfer out to geostationary orbit. And yeah, that's basically how most hydrolox rockets work, how SLS also works because it's aiming for the moon. This is not. This was always meant to have a third stage to transfer stuff out to the moon. And this was optimized for low Earth orbit, low Earth orbit payload capacity. So that's why it's like the way it is and why it has such a good mass fraction, because when you do optimize a two-stage hydrolox rocket for low Earth orbit, it turns out that you basically get optimal stages out of it because they each contribute about half of what it takes to get to orbit. And that's what they're supposed to contribute. So that's how we get the high payload fraction, the fact that it can carry such a high percentage of its launch mass to low Earth orbit. Well, it's January, that's because that's the date it starts at, so we're gonna be launching in the dark. Okay, ignition. And go. And off goes the Kasei II. The Kasei I is only the diameter of SLS, so 8.4 meters. And it has 5 of these engines instead of 9. Because Tampico, where we're at, doesn't have the inclination of the moon, it has 22.5 instead of 28. We do have to go to a non-90 degree heading. Well, we are certainly past the speed of sound, going through maximum dynamic pressure. This is a fairly simple rocket, so hopefully there isn't too much dynamic pressure. Okay, staging time. Staging. And fairings, might as well. While we have very low thrusts going on, might as well get those away. And we continue. And at this point I'll also unlock the tanks, because I didn't want them replenishing or anything. The radiators on the stage act as surface radiators, not extending radiators, because right now they don't have a pivot. I'll probably change that eventually. Well, we're pretty close to actually putting the whole Fuji stage in orbit. Well, again, it's only half full, so... But, yeah. We will still deorbit this stage as planned. But really just barely. And yeah, these little Hydrolox engines are not very powerful at all. I think they're 16 kilonewtons each. Should probably just increase their thrust to be BE7s or something. Okay, well that's more than enough. Alright, so as you can see, let me shut down the engine, the OMS engines. We have 30,000 meters per second, but it takes 55 days to use it, but we're certainly not aiming to use 55 days worth. So really 100 tons is not going to be too bad, I feel, but let's just make sure. It could probably do more than that. VASIMR, really good stuff. Right now, all of these together is producing 1 kilonewton. Is that how much they would get using hydrogen with the amount of power that we are shoving through them, 2.4 megawatts? I'm not sure. On the other hand, if it does take us longer, this is just meant to be a cargo vessel. If it takes longer to get this cargo over to the moon, that's probably okay as long as we can control boil-off in that time. So it is a question of a boil-off control. In this case, if these numbers are good, actually we have way more power than we're using. I think this reactor setup is, each reactor is producing 24 megawatts if we wanted to use it. It's just a matter of how big the VASIMR engines would need to be in order to use the power. Right now they're not drawing that, they're drawing 800 kilowatts apiece in theory. So that's the situation. But yeah, there are plenty of unknowns with VASIMRs since we haven't actually seen them used in practice, and certainly not with hydrogen. They've only been used with argon gas. But alright, let's see what we can do with it. So Pekka's plugin is on this, and so we'll just set it up for prograde and we'll cycle out. But VASIMR is a thing that they are working on right now. They have a argon prototype. That one does not get this much specific impulse, of course, but the benefit of VASIMR is that you can trade specific impulse for thrust. And in this case, we're assuming some trade-off. I'm not aiming for the highest ISP that hydrogen could give us. We've traded about half of that in favor of thrust. I don't expect it to take 55 days to get to the moon and back. So that's why boil-off is probably not that big a deal. Also, we are actually containing the boil-off. We have the hydrogen and oxygen gas tanks, which you can see are filling up now. So we do have boil-off happening. It's just that we will use cryocooling to cool that back down eventually. I didn't even put MLI layers on here, I don't think. Let me check. Do you have MLI layers? RF boil-off, no MLI. So right now we're operating on a no MLI situation. Possibly we should have MLI layers, but again, we're assuming that we can just cool the stuff. After 2 days we have this sort of orbit, about 6,000 kilometers circular. There's a lot you can do when you have really big nuclear reactors. They're not physically very big, right? They look very small, but you have to keep in consideration the fact that with NTRs like the NERVA, and you've seen NERVA is, about 10 tons, it will look reasonably big back here, maybe double the diameter of this nuclear reactor. But the NERVA reactor gets in the gigawatt range. We're only getting 24 megawatts from these, or 17 it looks like actually. Electric efficiency is only 58%, but that reactor on NERVA is a gigawatt reactor, I think maybe 2 gigawatts or something like that. So it is much larger than the ones that we have here. And if it's double the diameter, then that would end up being 8 times the volume, and we're getting less than 8 times the power from these. So it's the case that you get a much smaller reactor if you only need 24 megawatts, or actually we only are looking for 2.4, so we would need a lot more radiator if we were actually trying to get 24 out of these. It's just that I can't tweak scale them that small. While we are cryocooling, which is what I'm doing, you can see that the hydrogen is being cooled. We're getting less hydrogen gas and getting more liquid hydrogen. It's important that the mass doesn't actually change. Of course, we're using a little bit of mass with the VASIMR, but it's actually not that much per second, so yeah. Mass is being conserved. That's the point. Okay, so in 4 days we'll do this burn. Well, I say in 4 days, so it'll probably take a little while. So we'll start out over here somewhere, about there. And it is actually a prograde burn, so we'll just hold prograde while doing it. And it is happening during time warp. Alright, that's fine. That's a nice close approach to the moon. Now we have to capture, which is a little bit trickier, because we have a limited amount of time to do it. But basically, getting there in 2 weeks. If we can muster this kind of power, 2 weeks. So we are slowing down all the way out here. Ignore that, that's wrong anyway. Okay, we have technically captured. And I'll continue to bring it down here. For once, on time, early even. To be honest, it might be good to just use the OMS fuel at this point. Let's see. We've been carrying the extra oxygen 308 meters per second. Well, that's not enough to actually bring us down all the way. But as we approach periapsis, maybe we can toss it on to help out. Oh, well, it wouldn't work during time warp, though. Okay, back to just the VASIMR. Yeah, we can't spiral in because eventually the periapsis will be in bad shape. We'll be crashing into the ground. And, of course, if we just had it loose to begin with, that wouldn't get very good results with the Oberth effect, and NASA does not need to spiral in this case. They would have it all pre-programmed, presumably. So this is how we're doing it. Patiently. Okay, but I think this is tight enough. 377 by 56. And that's what we've got at right now. And at this point, I will release the test payload. That's 100 tons gone. And we could probably bring the test payload back. Actually, I should just kept it, shouldn't I have? I mean, it's not like we need more Delta V. But the test was for 100 tons to the moon. I guess we could have had 100 tons coming back as well. I'll think about that later. But what would we want to bring back, considering it can only be cargo? But maybe we mine something interesting on the moon. I don't know. But we clearly have way more Delta V than we need. Let's just go prograde, spiral out, go back, and call it a day. I feel like I need to nerf this a bit. It's too capable. I think we'll end up in a moon-like orbit and then go retrograde around the Earth. Okay, we remain in orbit around the Earth. That's all we want, really. Maybe having an inclination that matches our launch site would be good too. Alright, once we're in Earth orbit, we can just go retrograde and cycle in, preferably without encountering the moon again. Okay, cycling down. Okay, maybe doing it up here. Maybe it's not going to be cycling down, because I feel like we're going to be crashing into the Earth pretty soon at this rate. Our engines are too powerful to cycle like this. Inclination is reachable by a 10 pico launch, but it's not directly in line with 10 pico. Alright, you'll have to forgive me, but it's getting really tedious to try and bring down the orbit any further than this. We're at 5,590 by 231, and it's close enough. I could do like a dozen more passes maybe in order to get down to a neater orbit that would allow something to rendezvous with it, but well, maybe with the Hydrolox engine, let's see, how much will it take actually? It's still a bit. It's not gotta be doable with just the Hydrolox engines. So yeah, another 800 of that. And it's taking a while. So it's just gonna spin here for a bit. So there you have it, 100 tons to the moon with the Kasei II, as long as we have this VASIMR stage, which is a lot better than the NTP. I'm liking VASIMR overall. I will nerf these a little bit, but yeah, I think it is definitely something worth pursuing. So, with that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.